Be live.
Can you hear any background from me?
If I do, when you're not speaking, if I hear any background from anyone, I will mute them if they're not speaking.
Okay, okay.
But we are live.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Community for Peace and Unity Town Hall. Reverend Ingram will open up with prayer.
Our gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to listen, oh God, and to be informed. We thank you for the officials from Norwalk and surrounding towns, oh God, who have consented to be a part of this panel. God, our desire again is to bring peace and unity and equity and equality to all of our communities. And so, God, we are certainly here to listen and to learn. We pray for those who would call in and would share their concerns and raise their questions. God, may it be done so in a spirit of respect, a spirit of love. And we pray a willingness to listen, oh God, to every voice, again, recognizing that a multi approach is required to address the issue of racism. We will not all think alike and act and speak alike, oh God, but it is important, a willingness to listen to one another. And to that end, I ask, oh God, your guidance as we go forth with this meeting. This is my prayer. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Ingram. I'm going to start with an opening statement. The Norwalk branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, along with the District Attorney's Office and the police chiefs from our surrounding towns, have come together in an attempt to provide a forum for the community to voice concerns and ask the questions you feel need to be a part of the discussion. Collectively, we believe that taking no action to bring about a meaningful change, remaining silent in the face of injustice, and maintaining the status quo is not an option. And we also know that policies are not enough. They are only foundational steps. We must start somewhere to begin to right the wrongs and that have been inflicted on people of color for decades. And tonight, we are taking steps to begin to move in that direction by first coming together to give voice to concerns, moving forward to implement meaningful change. The National Office of the NAACP, under the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, has laid out an agenda focusing on systemic changes necessary to hold law enforcement accountable. The Norwalk branch agrees with the national agenda and support movement to realize implementation of the following as stated in the act. Ban chokeholds, ban no-knock warrants in drug cases, ban racial profiling, and qualified immunity for law enforcement, establish public national police misconduct registry, require data collection on deadly force, require deadly force to only be used as last result, establish duties to intervene standards, mandate uniformed officers to use body dash cameras, establish national standards for law enforcement, invest in public grants for re-imaging policing, fund independent counsels to prosecute police misconduct, strengthen pattern and practice investigations, make lynching a federal hate crime. In addition, on local level, we call for the revision or creation of the Civilian Advisory Review Board. Together, we must move from the seat of indifference and silence to stand up and speak out against systemic racism and social injustice everywhere. Thank you. So I would like to introduce the moderators for tonight. That's Monica Keene, a 28-year-old native from Washington, D.C., raised and a resident of Norwalk, Connecticut, a Brian McMahon alumni. She is currently pursuing her master's at the University of Bridgeport Business Administrator for Healthcare and Management, also employed by the Norwalk Hospital as their security administrator. Cameron Shockey OKK has lived in Norwalk nearly all his life. He graduated from Milton Academy in Massachusetts and did a postgraduate year at Philip Exterior Academy in New Hampshire. He is currently a rising sophomore at Columbia University in New York City. He plans to major in biology with a minor in jazz studies. He also plays for Columbia's basketball team. Cameron attends the Calvary Baptist Church in South Norwalk and grew up playing basketball at the George Washington Carver Center. The next, Monica, do you have an opening statement? You want to start?
Yes, I just want to say, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for taking this time out. To have this very much needed and necessary discussion. Myself, having friends and family who are a part of their local police force, and also having friends and family who died at the hands of police due to police brutality, I know that there are good and bad to both sides. And for you all to be here and present and willing to have this difficult and uncomfortable conversation and open dialogue with our community is very much appreciated. On March 25th, the events that transpired that led to the tragic death of George Floyd sparked an uprising not only in our community, but in the world. And I want to help make a difference and be a part of a change for police interactions with people of color, and a change where we voice our concerns and we be heard, a change for the better where we silence systematic racism and injustice. So having this open dialogue is a start that we need, and it's only the beginning. Thank you.
I'll say my opening statement now. Thank you everyone for attending this event this evening. I think it is important that we are having this conversation. I believe there has been a lack of communication between the police and the community in the past, and I feel that this is more than necessary to have meetings such as this one. I also think it is vital to the growth of our community that we have younger generations present in these discussions because we can all listen and learn from one another. Thank you.
So I see that there are 2 questions already. Monica, can you get those questions? Start those questions.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, Monica, can you, for those of the public that are listening in, if you click on the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, if you have any questions, you can type in your question there. There's no need to raise your hand electronically. Just put in your question under Q&A, and we will try to get to everyone's question. Thank you.
Hey, Larry, is there a way to raise the volume for Monica? I'm having trouble hearing her. Or is that not something you can do?
That's not, I can't do anything. Monica, if you could try to maybe get a little closer to your microphone or speak a little louder.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with the first question.
Monica, I'm sorry. We got to introduce the panel. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, not a problem. So Cam, if you want to start with the first set.
Sure. We have Darien Chief of Police Donald Anderson, Weston Police Captain Matthew Rodacki. We have Weston Chief of Police Edwin Hennian, and Westport Chief of Police Fodi Koskinas. Monica, would you like to continue?
Yes. We have New Canaan Chief of Police Leon Kolakowski, Norwalk Chief Police Thomas Kohowick, Wilton Chief Police John Lynch, and Connecticut State Attorney Richard Colangelo, and Connecticut State Attorney for the District Paul Forensic on the line. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to read off the first question. I would like to find credible third parties who can inform citizens about police's effectiveness at ensuring equality and protection and enforcement. What organizations evaluate police departments on their policies and track records in these matters? How does Norwalk compare to other cities and towns? So Norwalk Chief Police Thomas Kohowick, did you want to start on answering this question?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. In fact, I got an email a short time ago, very similar to that. So I think it might be the same person. I was going to respond after this meeting was over, but I'll respond here. I'm not aware of an organization that does exactly what the question asked, but in a similar way, I think it relates to the accreditation process that many of us, I think most of us here in this, the chiefs in this area are involved in. I know we're nationally accredited through the Commission on Accreditation. And as such, we have outside assessors that come from around the country that review our policies and procedures and verify that we're in compliance with 484 standards. And I think that does some of what the question regarded. I don't think it answers the entire question because I don't think there is an organization that does exactly what was described, but I think it comes close to that in that these outside assessors who are not known to us, they come from all over. I was an assessor for many years and a team leader for Kalia. And, you know, we visited, I went to Ohio, Indiana, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and we reviewed departments and give them advice on their policies and procedures and also verified compliance with those policies. And I think most of the departments that are seated here at this table are Connecticut accredited, which is a similar process here in the state of Connecticut. So I think we all, in some respect, do get monitored by an outside agency.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalik.
Okay, so we have another question. In regards to pending criminal cases, is it possible for a positive change so prosecutors can be more approachable and reconsider pending cases, especially for those who refuse to take AR programs because they believe in their innocence? This is directed to anybody.
I can answer that. Well, first of all, I think we don't, anyone who wants to plead not guilty obviously has that right. And when we explain to defendants about the diversionary programs, they're under no obligation to take them. So we don't, it's not necessarily an expectation that they have to take the program. If they want to plead not guilty, they have that absolute right and we respect it. So it's not something that we would, you know, brush over and just, you know, try to move the case with the diversionary program. If they believe they're not guilty, if they're represented by counsel, their lawyer will explain to us, you know, what their side of the story is and why they want to proceed to trial in an attempt to negotiate and resolve the case, either with a plea or a nollie. But no one is forced to take any kind of diversionary program, and we don't, you know, we don't. The fact that you choose not to take the program doesn't factor into our method of resolving a case.
Yeah, if I can. I'll tell you that once the COVID pandemic hit, you know, it kind of changed the way we do business in the criminal justice system now across the state. So the prosecutors throughout the state should be reviewing the files to make a determination on what they think an appropriate disposition is based on the facts and circumstances behind that, but also, you know, keeping in mind that you know, we're in really uncharted territories now in this state, in the country, with the pandemic and the way that, you know, the amount of business we're able to handle and the way that we're handling the business. You know, they mentioned that there's, you know, 3 years or more for a trial. You know, it's going to be a while before we get to have the ability to have a jury trial again, and to be able to do it safely. And that's one of the things that I know that the chief court administrator is working on and judicial is working on. And I've been in part of those discussions to make sure that whatever happens in court, we're able to do it safely in a way to keep everybody kind of COVID free.
Thank you both. See here. This next question is directed to Wilton's Chief Police, John Lynch. I would like to know the racial composition of the Wilton Police and how they specifically recruit people of color.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a popular question. I recently gave a interview to our local media on Good Morning Wilton. It's available if anybody's interested, and that was one of the subject or topics we discussed. I'll preface that with, we are bound by the state of Connecticut rules, the Police Officer Standard Training Academy. There's a whole process. It's very thorough. So, but our makeup right now is we have one African-American male officer. We do have officers from, other countries that are now American citizens and are police officers. But for many years, when I was in training at least 20, 25 years ago, we actively recruited minority representation, and it's proved quite helpful. We would go to colleges, we would put out notices, public notices, we would do job fairs, and try to engage with the minority populations. But again, with the high standards and interest level, there hasn't been much interest. So we can only use those that apply and those that meet certain requirements. So it's been difficult, but we are wide open to, it's something that we've addressed and we've always discussed.
Would anybody else from a different city care to talk about that?
I'll talk about that. I'm Leon Krolikowski, New Canaan PD. I'm proud that our department is nearly 20% diverse in that African-American and Hispanic officers, and about a third diverse of folks that aren't typically in law enforcement, which includes females. So at this moment, we have the most African-American, Hispanic, and female officers ever in our history. And I think that makes us a great department, and we've been lucky to find great people. And I think that helps us perform very effectively and treat everybody fairly and do a great job for the entire town.
Thank you. The next question is, what are police departments doing to decrease over-policing of specific communities?
I can start if that's all right. This is a question that's come up quite a bit over the last several years. It started out with the IMRP for Central doing the racial profiling stats. And what they found is many times in some communities, especially the poorer communities, police are over-policing in a sense because equipment violations, operating under suspension, no insurance, things like that are more prevalent than in other areas of the city. We've discussed that, and that's something I sit on the state task force right now, along with State's Attorney Colangelo, and we're looking at that as one issue of whether some of these minor violations should be something that the police enforce, such as equipment violations, minor traffic. Is that something that the DMV should be looking at, or inspections, et cetera? Because that does put police in a position to interact with people where maybe they wouldn't normally interact with if those violations weren't something that the police were enforcing. So I think the real question there is whether the state wants to change the laws and remove that from something the police want to look at. And that's something that the state task force is looking at right now, and our subcommittees will be evaluating to see.
Thank you, Mr. Kohawick. So this next question is directed to everyone. It states that tear gas is a chemical agent that is banned in warfare. Does any of the police departments have tear gas? And if so, would the mayor's office be considered would consider banning it.
I don't want to hog everything, but I can respond to that as well. Here in Norwalk, our tactical team does have tear gas. We haven't used it in some time. It's reserved for specific situations, such as a barricaded subject, an armed subject. It's not something that we would use normally in situations. I wouldn't suggest that banning it would be a preferable option. It does have a value, but it's something that we would want to use only in very specific situations. I can't speak to the rest. I think the other agencies have a regional team, and they can speak to that.
I'll jump in on that from Darien. I'm Don Anderson, the chief. I see a request here to introduce ourselves, so I'm appreciative of being here tonight. We are part of the Southwest Regional Emergency Response Team, and they certainly do have chemical agents that are deployed if necessary. Here in Darien, in my 37 years, we have never deployed tear gas of any type. So do we have it? Yes. Have we ever deployed it? No, we have not.
Just to clarify, we don't have it here on site in Wilton, nor I don't think Darien does. We each have members for this. It's basically a SWAT team, and it's used for tactics, kind of like what Chief Kahal described.
Thank you. We have another question. What actions are our police departments currently taking to complete the demands regarding body cameras?
Well, again, here in Darien, all officers are equipped with body cameras, including the chief of police, although I don't wear one with a suit and tie, but all officers have them. We've had them here for 2 or 3 years, and I think they have brought about certainly an increased transparency. I'm a big fan of body cameras. When we do get the rare complaint from anyone, whether it be a minority operator or anyone, we can go right to the videotape. Like Werner Wolf used to say, let's go to the videotape. And we can see what transpired. And, many times the perception of the person coming in or the perception of the officer is not exactly what they remember. But when they watch the video and they say, oh, I don't really remember it happening like that, I can see where there might be some common ground. So I am a firm proponent of body cameras for police. I think they serve an excellent purpose on both sides.
And go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add that Wilton is fully equipped. We've been equipped for a long time with in-car and body-worn cameras for at least 3 or 4 years. But our officers specifically requested that we get them. So they were supportive 100%.
Yeah, here in Norwalk, we've had them for many years, probably 5 or 6 years now. I think we're one of the first to have them, aside from Milford, for the cities. I know Brenda's well aware that we have body cameras. She's sat in with me and reviewed many videos over the years. In fact, as recently as a couple of days ago, and we'll be reviewing some more videos next week. But I echo Chief Anderson's comments. It's been a great value to everyone to have the body cameras, and I encourage every department to get them. There's no downside.
Thank you. Mr. Kolahowski, did you want to add to that? I saw hands.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first departments in Fairfield County to get them more than 6 years ago. And they're a great tool. And frankly, usually they exonerate officers because they show that they behaved properly and perhaps the motorist had a miscommunication or wasn't aware of what exactly happened. So they're a great tool. And I'd say the state should make it mandatory for every department in Connecticut to have them because there's no reason not to.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to hear from the other panelists as well, from Westport Chief of Police and Westport Chief of Police, Fody Koskinis and Edwin Hainan, on this question as well.
Sure. Good evening. It's Fody Koskinis for the Westport Police Department. Thanks, Monica. The Westport Police Department has had cameras in use for 4 years now. We started off with the pilot program, was strictly voluntary. We saw more and more officers participating on their own. For the last 14 to 18 months, and certainly the last 14 months, it's mandatory that every officer have a body camera. I personally found it an incredible tool early in my career. I see Rich Colangelo, and he's to my left. I think I was one of the only officers that had an in-car video camera my entire career on the road, and I was a dog handler. So I couldn't have been any more in favor of them then, and certainly in favor of them now. And I'll agree with the other chiefs. it is a fair tool on all sides. It really gives it incredible checks and balances. And I think anybody who would be against that would not be a strong representative of what we stand for.
Thank you. And Mr. Heenan, did you want to add to that question as well?
Yeah, I'm Ed Hennigan, Chief of the Weston Police Department. We currently do not have body cameras employed in Weston. We're currently testing them on many platforms to see which would be more amenable to a small department like we have in Weston. Weston Police is a very small police department. I have 9 patrol officers, 3 sergeants, a detective, and 2 SROs. So when you have a department that small, it's somewhat problematic on cost for them, but we're exploring it. I am personally for them. I came from another agency in a previous career, the Connecticut State Police, that employs body cameras, and found them to be very useful in policing. It's just we haven't gotten to that process yet where they've been approved through the town with a funding source. I look forward to the state, if they want to fund it in a grant, we would certainly take advantage of that in Weston and employ them.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to open up the next question to everyone. Would your department be willing to work alongside a civilian review board?
Monica, can I take the first one of that? It's Fody Koskinos from the Westwood Police Department.
Yes.
The reason I wanted to jump first on this, as of today, our selectmen announced that we do have a civilian review panel. We have never had one in the past. This came in collaboration with the police department. This is not something that got forced on us. We see what's happening throughout our country and the level of transparency that's needed. He has appointed 3 people. 2 of them are elected officials, and one of them is the chairman of our diversity group. He's an African-American male, highly respected, very open-minded, but certainly speaks for what he stands for. So we thought that was a great approach to what's going on. We are also one of the few police departments that does not have oversight of a police commission. We report directly to the selectmen. So this was an incredible opportunity for a third party to review complaints as they come in. We also extended it that this panel will have direct contact with any hiring that's done within the organization. They'll be part of the interview process and have substantial say in what happens. We did bring it one level further because as we do this, I know it's focused on police, but I think we should focus on all emergency services because in one way or another, they face the same issues. Mm-hmm. And this panel will also review fire department and EMS in the town of Westbourne. We're very proud of that. That really hit the press today. And we're looking forward to working with that panel and increasing transparency and accountability of our officers and departments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else care to respond?
Sure, I'll respond to that. For decades, we've had a police commission, which is a appointed body of citizens in the town that are appointed for 3-year terms or so. So we kind of do have a civilian review panel that oversees our department and has statutory authority for management and supervision. So we've had that and it works really well, and no reason to change it.
Thank you.
Leon froze up for a minute. I don't know if I'm going to repeat what he said, but we've had a 3-member civilian police commission here for as long as the police department has been in existence, which is 95 years. They are a true oversight board for the police department. They conduct trial boards in the event that we need them. I have full confidence in our 3-member police commission, which is appointed from both sides of the aisle to oversee police department operations. I think that civilian oversight of this department has served us very well, and I have no aversion whatsoever of civilian oversight for police departments. I just don't.
Thank you. Next question. Is there any attempt to reduce the caseload for public defenders so they can properly handle one case without a plea bargain?
And I'll jump in on this one if I can start with it. The public defenders were subject to a lawsuit, so they have case standards, a number of cases they can handle. So I think plea bargains realistically are a function of our system. 95 to 98% of the things we do in court end up in a plea bargain. As Paul talked about before, no one's ever forced to plead guilty. And if anybody feels like they are being forced to plead guilty, they should let the court know that as they go through the canvas procedure. But I know that it's the Public Defender Services keeps track of and monitors a number of cases that their individual lawyers have and handle.
Yeah, if I could just jump in too, I would agree. And, within the last 10 years, I mean, at least in Stanford, where I work, there's been times when the public defenders, their office has almost exceeded ours, the state's attorney's office, and we handle cases that we're asked to handle and required to handle cases that they don't, for instance, like motor vehicle cases. So I don't think that that's an issue, at least down in my jurisdiction.
Thank you. For our next question, this is directed to anyone. Does qualified immunity apply to your department? Is this a local, state, or national issue? And how much does the police union factor into this?
I kind of would like to defer to our two attorneys on that, because I think they have a better understanding of that and how the implications of that. I know it's a big issue. I don't know if Rich or our new state's attorney at Stanford, Paul, want to chime in on that?
Does the question, is it in terms of immunity of police officers out in the public? Is that, or are you talking about prosecutorial?
I think they're talking about in civil suits, qualified immunity, which has been a big topic of late.
So before the attorneys jump in, I'll jump in on qualified immunity, because I think there seems to be a major misconception on what qualified immunity is as of late. I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV, but qualified immunity simply protects not negligent, not reckless, not criminal conduct. It doesn't protect any of those things for police officers. So reckless conduct, negligent conduct, and criminal conduct are not protected under qualified immunity. Qualified immunity has been around for over 100 years, and it offers some level of protection to police officers who believe they're operating correctly, or a reasonable officer could assume that he was operating correctly and lawfully. So I just like to always give people that little bit of flavor that the reckless, negligent, or criminal conduct on behalf of a police officer is no way protected under qualified immunity, which is a national standard for police officers. It all comes down to reasonableness. When an officer acts unreasonably or outside of the law, qualified immunity is not applying for that officer. So it does protect good officers. It does not protect officers who operate outside of the law or good, solid, reasonable standard.
I would agree. That's my understanding as well. And it's designed to protect, officers who in their daily job out on the street face a number of situations that if they were to be held liable and to be constantly sued, really, who would do the job? Who would want it? So it's not a free-for-all. It doesn't protect criminal conduct or reckless or, my understanding, negligent conduct either.
Thank you. For our next question, we have, this goes for everyone. What is your view of school resource officers?
I'll jump in quickly on that too. I like it. I think if they're the eyes and ears of the school. They know the people. I think they're invaluable in terms of the juvenile court system. They get to know the kids, and I think it's a good thing, especially in urban school districts. I think it's I've interacted with a number of them at Stanford, not so much Norwalk because I was never in the GA there, but I think it's a good thing.
I'll speak for Norwalk, and I think it's been a tremendous program. I think it's build relationships with the kids. We have them in the high schools, middle schools, and they also do the elementary schools. I think the big issue is to have a good MOU with your school district that you're not going to enforce school-based violations. I think that's where some of the issues have arisen around the country, where police are getting involved in minor violations and bringing those kids into the criminal justice system. I don't think we see that in our area here. I think everyone here that has school resource officers has a good understanding with their districts on what they should or shouldn't be doing. And I think it's just been a positive to build relationships with the kids in the schools.
I was going to echo what the chief said. I mean, as long as you go about it the right way, and usually school resource officers, the first, their first action isn't or shouldn't be, let's make an arrest. They want to intervene in a situation if kids are going to be either they're in danger or they're they're at risk in some way, and then kind of investigate and go from there. So the first action shouldn't be or couldn't be, shouldn't be, hey, we're going to make an arrest here. It should be, let's make sure the kid's safe and figure out where we're going to go.
We have 2 SROs here in Darien. We have one in the high school that now we are on our 2nd officer actually assigned there. So I think we're probably 6 or 7 years into the SRO in the high school. We've had now our first, we only have one middle school. We have an SRO there this year. He's our first SRO there. Both have been resounding successes. And to echo the state's attorney, they don't do criminal investigations. That's not what they're there for. If you need investigation of students, it is done by our youth detectives and not by the SRO. The SRO is solely there as a resource to the students. And I cannot tell you how many compliments that I've gotten, as well as my predecessor chiefs, from our SROs for the job that they're doing there. They're really, these kids come back a couple, 3, 4 years later and say, what a good job that they did with them. Their doors are always open. The role that they're playing, I think, is a very effective role in our school system. And I know the Board of Education is fully supportive of it as well.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to school resource officers, and why? Okay. So we'll move on to the next question. This is for everyone as well. In efforts to build a relationship between the police and citizens, how do you plan on implementing programs that focus on youth as well as adults in efforts to reduce crime?
We have strong programs here in Darien with the youth. We have Girls Night Out that is run by one of our lieutenants. We have Students Against Destructive Decisions, which is run by panelists of one of our sergeants. We have Cops and Kids Adventures, which we all participate in, 14 or 15 events a year where we take kids out to whether it be go-karting, whether it be zip lining, whether it be bowling, whether it just be pizza night out. We are very engaged, a lot of our officers here in Darien, with the youth, especially in the middle school years. So we have 3 or 4 or 5 very successful programs. Coupled with, under the auspices of the State's Attorney's Office with Rich Colangelo, we have a juvenile review board that we implemented, where it's taking these minor cases or fairly minor cases out of the criminal justice system and the juvenile justice system, keeping it here with a juvenile review board, which is staffed by a lot of the people that you may know and the types of people that you may know, bring about a much better outcome for kids who are dabbling in behavior that they shouldn't be. And that juvenile review board has, again, been met with resounding success. It's an absolute home run for our folks here.
Yeah, I would say here in Norwalk, I echo some of the things that Chief Anderson said with the JRB. We also have our Police Activities League, which has been going for many years, which is basically just for the youth. So we raise money to help with youth programs in the city. We started a public safety cadet program many years ago, I think right when I became chief. And that's for police and fire, where we have about 40 to 50 youth that meet, well, they haven't met with COVID now, but prior to that, they were meeting monthly. And that was a very diverse group of kids. And actually one of those youth is now a police officer in Bridgeport. And another one of those youth is on our list now here in Norwalk. So it's been a successful program. We also have several officers here in Norwalk that are mentors in our Human Services Council mentoring program. I'm one of them. I've been mentoring a youth since 3rd grade who is now going into Brian McMahon next year. So we've been very focused on the youth here, and the summer camps, which unfortunately are not going to be held this year. But in the past, we've done a lot with the summer camps there as well.
Thank you. The next question is directed towards Attorney Colangelo. You sponsored ethical guidelines adoption by state attorneys in 2019. Have you or your office participated in any investigations of criminal complaints against police where you previously prosecuted the complaint for criminal charges based upon the basis of statements made by the police, by the same police officers?
Yeah, I mean, there have been throughout my career officers that I've prosecuted, and they were officers in cases that I prosecuted before that. If an officer is prosecuted and convicted, they'd be decertified by post, so they wouldn't be an officer again or anymore. If there's ever a situation where it's an officer that I felt too close to, and I know Attorney Forensic is going to feel the same way, that I had a special relationship with, therefore it would give an appearance of a conflict. I might send that. Now in my new position, I get those calls from state's attorneys when that happens, saying, hey, I've got a police officer that's charged with a crime. Can you send it to another jurisdiction or have somebody in the chief state's attorney's office investigate it so there is no conflict, or I believe there's a conflict, or so there's no appearance of a conflict.
I could just jump in. There are actually 3 cases, I believe, in Stanford right now that of officers being prosecuted.
The second part of that question, Cam, you want to hit that one too?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's one part that says who conducts the investigation in that case, and would you care to answer that part?
Well, the investigation, if there is a conflict or a state's attorney feels there's a conflict, in my new role now as chief state's attorney, I will make sure that that case is prosecuted by another office. It might be a situation where Attorney Forensic, someone in his office might have a conflict, so I might send it to the Norwalk office and keep it in the same jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. And the last part to that question is, when someone in your office is accused of closing investigations without completing it, which entity would deal with such a complaint?
I mean, that complaint, just the way that the criminal justice system is set up in Connecticut, the chief state's attorney is the administrative head of the agency, and each judicial district is headed by an independent state's attorney. So when that complaint comes in, it would go to the state's attorney in the jurisdiction to investigate that in one of their cases in their area. If the person ultimately feels like they didn't get satisfaction, it might come back to or up to the chief state's attorney's office again. On some rare occasions, we might look into it again to make a determination of, was the action appropriate or not. The last part of that question is, do I intend to support the formation of an independent agency in Inspector General's office to investigate complaints against police? There is talk of the legislature in this legislative session. If they go into special session, that's one of the things they're talking about doing. I think an Inspector General or someone to oversee or investigate the police use of deadly force cases that are now investigated by state's attorneys is probably a good idea for the state. I'd have to see the language of the proposal to, is it something I support? Yeah, I support it in concept. I have to see what the language of the statute actually is and how it would work. I've been consulting with the chairs of the Judiciary Committee, talking to them about what the unit should look like, because it does come with a fiscal note. Unfortunately, it's not something the Division of Criminal Justice can do with existing staff. But as long as the unit is staffed appropriately and given the tools they need to do these investigations, yeah, I think it's a good idea for the state.
Thank you, Mr. Colangelo. Our next question, I'm going to open this up to everyone. It states, can you clarify the public belief or possible fact that the prosecutors mainly side with the police, making it the reason for police to get away with malicious behavior?
Can I start with this one?
Absolutely.
This happens a lot in cases, and I know that there's a perception of that out there. As a prosecutor, we really don't have a side in any case that we prosecute. As I said before, I've prosecuted police officers throughout my career. I'm friends with police officers, but in prosecuting police officers, I find that, I have found that we, while we might play in the same field, we might not get dressed in the same dressing room. I mean, they have allegiances that they have for all their officers and their so, we really don't have a side in the case. We're going to look at the facts as they are given to us, apply them to the law, and make a determination on whether we could prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And the special ethical obligations for prosecutors require us not to charge a case if we can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So those are things, and if anybody comes across a prosecutor in the state and they're not acting that way, I'm going to ask you to please reach out to me and let me know, because I'm going to have a conversation.
Yeah, if I could just jump in too, I think it's important for the public to be aware of the fact that we, in most cases, we review the work of police officers. Where I work in Part A, and I've been there for almost 20 years. I mean, we review warrants on a regular basis. We don't necessarily automatically side with the detective that is submitting these warrants to us. Many times we reject warrants, and that doesn't sit well with the police. So I think there's a perception that we're just another arm of the police, and that's really not true. We get along with the police. We respect their work. We're friends with the police, most of them. They do great work. But we review their work as a prosecutor. That's what we do. So we're not really, like Rich said. I mean, in general terms, we're on the same team, but we have different interests and different obligations. So we are different.
I'll vouch for the fact that they are very tough. They're very strict. They want to make sure they have the evidence. So.
Thank you. The next question is directed towards Chief Kulhalik, but I also want to open it up to everybody. In terms of the accreditation process, are there more than two outcomes, pass fail, of this process? And then the second part to this question is, what would reliably inform citizens how different our policing is from that of Minneapolis in terms of equality?
Yeah, well, speaking for the accreditation process, you either are accredited, re-accredited, or not. So basically, it is a pass-fail. There is a middle ground where, if it's a minor violation, so to speak, where some proof was not available for a standard, but in practice the agency was doing it, you might get a conditional re-accreditation. But generally, it's a pass-fail. As far as how are we different from Minneapolis, I don't know Minneapolis's training. I don't know their post guidelines, but I sit on the Police Officer Standards and Training Council for Connecticut, as Rich does, and he can verify that Connecticut has some of the best training in the country. We've had our training put up against what was considered to be the best in Washington State, and they told us as well that we had some of the best training. We did add a couple things that they thought would make us even better. So I'm confident that in Connecticut, we do a great job of our training, but it's not all about training. I mean, a lot of things we're talking about is really behavior more than training. So I think, it's a complex issue that we're dealing with, but I think Connecticut is doing what they can so far, and we're continuing to try to strive to improve and make those changes where we can.
Thank you. Captain Brodacki, do you care to talk about this?
Chairman, it's Fody Koskinas from the Westport. I can chime in also. I think it's eye-opening. I'm going to obviously, I feel very strongly about the accreditation process. Right up to late 2016, and I became chief in 2016, the Westport Police Department, believe it or not, was operating under a 1972 manual for police duties, which was older than I am, certainly when I took over as chief. So you can imagine, even from language and tactics and protocols, we were literally operating under a 1972 manual. I don't know what the number is throughout the country, but I can tell you the departments represented today, that is certainly not the case anymore, and certainly not in Westport. The accreditation process is also something that's constantly evaluated. You don't just get a pass and you don't revisit it. It's revisited all the time. So even though we say it's a pass or fail, there's checks and balances. You're checking all things throughout the year. And we have an officer specifically assigned to that. And it's everything from the way calls are taken in, to the way they're handled, to the way policies are applied, use of force, motor vehicle stops. It just goes down a spectrum of everything that we do day to day. So it's an incredible system for checks and balances. So like Chief Kulhalik said, it's very different in this part of the country, and certainly this part of the state, and I can only speak for us here, how far ahead we are. When we look at the #8 of demands that are being done around the country that are being requested and demanded for, I can tell you just about all of them, if not all of them, we either meet or exceed the expectations. There's some language difference on what chokeholds can be used, or if they're not going to be used. They're certainly banned, but there's some openness as if you're going to use deadly force, are you still willing to use a chokehold before you use your firearm, and things like that are open right now. But out of all those things, I will say we either meet or exceed the expectations of the public, and I think we're very proud of that.
Thank you. For our next question is asking if you could, and this is open up to anyone, can you share more about civilian advisory review boards? Who would sit on these boards and who are selected for them? What are the circumstances would you use for these boards?
I think there's two different things in that question, but here in Darien, the way our general orders are set up, Chief of Police does have some ability to level discipline against officers, but it is fairly restrictive. Anything beyond what the chief can mete out for minor offenses goes to the police commission, which is a 3-member civilian board that's appointed by the Board of Selectmen from residents here in Darien, and they would hear issues involving a more significant discipline or officer misconduct. So we have to implement it very, very infrequently here in Darien, but I have full confidence in that police commission that they would uphold the right of the public and ensure that professional conduct was being performed by officers. I have full confidence in our police commission.
I would just add that each municipality is dealing with their own charter, their own city ordinances, and their own union contracts when it comes to discipline, civilian review boards, and how that is meted out. So Connecticut's a little different because we have over 100 police departments in the state, and each one is dealing with things in a different manner with different contracts, different city ordinances, different charters. So in order to have a uniform policy throughout the state, it would take a robust change in a lot of municipalities, city charters, union contracts, et cetera, to have one system that would work everywhere. And maybe it wouldn't work everywhere. I think it's up to each individual municipality to decide how best they think they want to manage their police department. And in doing so, they can decide what type of civilian review board, if they want one, and how discipline is going to be arranged, and then negotiate that and adjust their charter to deal with it.
Can I add that what Chief Kahalik was just saying about the unions? I think there's a misperception of what the union influence is. We negotiate with the union part of the process, how it's handled, not the discipline, and they have the recourse to file a grievance. So the union doesn't have much say in the disciplinary action as compared to the way it's handled.
Thank you. The next question I'd like to direct towards the two attorneys. If there is a complaint against one of the police chiefs present here today, which entity would investigate that complaint? I know both of you have talked a bit on this, but would you be able to elaborate?
If the complaint came in, it should go to, the department is probably not going to take that complaint. It would probably come to the state's attorney's office, and they would, so Attorney Forensic will jump in on this, but he has staff that could investigate it. In the chief state's attorney's office, we have a statewide prosecution unit that we could use to do something like that. The state police might be called in depending on what the resources are of that specific judicial district. And I know I've had major crime investigate instances like that.
Or we could have, we're staffed actually with inspectors in our office that are have police powers or police inspectors. So if that situation arose in my jurisdiction, one option that I would have would be to have my inspectors investigate, because they're basically detectives. They have police powers.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
Our police commission is a civilian board. They would also investigate, and the town has in the past hired outside neutral entities, professionals, to do investigations as well.
Thank you. To kind of piggyback on the last question, to what extent are the police chiefs hands tied when it comes to removing an officer from their police force?
I could speak as far as Norwalk is concerned. We're a little different. We have a police commission here, but they do not handle disciplinary matters. They oversee the department, but all discipline is through the chief's office. So if I issue discipline to an officer, whether that's a written warning or a termination, that officer has the right to file a grievance per the union contract. Then that grievance comes back to me. I can decide whether I thought I did the right thing. If I don't change my opinion, then he can file with the state labor board. And then there's a full hearing that goes on with the state labor board to decide how that issue is handled. So we make our decision, and then we're at the mercy of the state labor board. If they overturn it, then the city can then go to the Superior Court to appeal that. But that's rare. It has happened, and we have had that happen, and we have won. But that's generally how the process works, at least in Norwalk.
Thank you. Mr. Kolakowski, would you like to elaborate or add anything to that as well?
Sure. I think all the chiefs, the
Thank you.
process is kind of similar, discipline-wise. And the end result is it will usually go to the state labor board. And who knows what decision they're going to make. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But it's never easy to terminate an officer. And it's a complex process, could be years long. And but I think for the right reasons, it's certainly possible, but not simple given the oversight of the state labor board.
Okay.
For the next question, in regards to body cameras and other devices, what are local police departments doing? This is directed towards Norwalk, but it's open to everyone as well. What are local police departments doing to ensure that these protective measures are being utilized?
Okay, well, since I'll start for Norwalk, every month we audit body camera video. We randomly pull cases to verify that officers are using the body camera. We also run audits to verify the number of calls an officer went on, was assigned to for the month, and how many body camera videos were downloaded to see if they match up. If they don't, then we take a closer look. And ultimately, it could be a situation where I have to issue discipline to an officer who does not properly utilize the body camera. Recently, I did discipline an officer who did not use the body camera after being warned the first time that he wasn't using it. That's very rare. The majority of the officers do use the camera regularly, and the officer in question has been using it. So the training, so to speak, the discipline did work in that case. So it's been, like I said, and most people have said, it's been a benefit, the body camera. So we really want to encourage officers to do that. And we do verify that they're using it by auditing. And I think most of the agencies here in some manner will audit their officers to make.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. So we adopted the state policy as part of the grant process a few years back. It's very strict. We have discipline officers for not, but they're not. It's just because they forgot. They got in the heat of something, and it was forgetfulness, and resolved that. And also the body camera that we had to wait because we went with a Panasonic product, but that's what we have in our cruisers. So when we activate our in-car camera, so one of the officers makes a stop, it automatically triggers his body camera as well. So we wanted to ensure, because if you leave it up to human error, you're going to have misses. So this kind of resolves some of that.
Our in-car cameras and our body cameras are on the same platform with the same vendor, and we take full advantage of technology in this. So if the lights of the police car come on, your in-car camera and your body camera go on. If the car exceeds 70 miles an hour, your body camera and your video in-car camera go on. So there's technology coming down the pike where if the officer draws his firearm from the holster, it will automatically put on the body cam. And I'm a firm proponent of that. That if a firearm clears the holster, your body camera, you don't have to remember to turn it on. It's always buffering, right? the officer has it on, it's powered up, and when you have any interaction with the public, you're supposed to be tapping it and starting it so the whole transaction is recorded. Technology is a great thing for the most part. In our patrol cars now, if you're zipping down the street, lights and siren, when you stop the car and you put the car in park, the siren goes off automatically. The officer doesn't have to do it anymore. So technology like this, I'm a firm proponent of that body camera can be activated automatically in certain circumstances where most of the time you want it on, and you don't have to think about turning it on.
Weston Chief Henning, would you like to talk about this? You're on mute.
Yep, sorry. I agree with Chief Anderson. The technology is there. We need to take advantage of it. Everything is transparent. That's what we're all working forward to do. So,
Thank you. For our next question, it's a couple parts, but I'm kind of gonna break it down for everyone. Looking at our panel now, there's not really a diverse bunch. And they want to know, how can you relate to the community that feels harassed by police?
Well, I'll start with that. That has been an issue that has been addressed or been brought up. And unfortunately, over the years, going back many years, and most of us, I think, on the panel here have been on probably 30 years or more. I know I've been here 38 years. And back when I came on, most of us that came on were white males. That was pretty much the norm back in the 80s. So over time, obviously, most of the people you see here have, made it through the ranks, and now they are in a position of leading their agencies. And that's something that has changed, is starting to change over time. We're recruiting a diverse workforce. We're promoting a diverse workforce, but it is a concern. I can tell you that long before I was the chief, I know when I took over as a community police lieutenant back in 2001, I think it was, I made it my business to get out into the community and try to get out there, introduce myself, make people comfortable, make them understand. And that's what we've been doing for the last 25 years, is really trying to show people that we do understand, we do care, we're out there. I know I don't look like some of the people that we police. I can't help that. All I can do is be me and do the best I can to go out there and do the best job I can. And I think I can speak for the rest of us, and that's what we try to do. You work from the heart, so to speak, and, we can only do what we can do, and we're doing the best we can.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that?
I see the part of the question says, when will it be mandated for retraining and longer time for training to become required to become a cop? I think that question is, how long of training do we get to become a police officer? As far as I know, the state of Connecticut has, if not the longest training regiment, and one of the longest training regiments in the entire country. That from the time of hiring to the time that you're a full-fledged police officer on your own is well over a year between the testing process and then the police academy and then a 10-week FTO program. So the training that we receive in Connecticut, I think far and away, stands above training from across the country. And I think by and large, I think the result of that training does show here. I firmly believe that.
Are there retrainings done as well?
Every 3 years we have, you must get a certain amount of retraining hours to maintain your certification as a police officer. So yes, there's ongoing training. We're very fortunate here in Darien to have the ability to go well above and beyond that mandated training for every 3 years, whether it be crisis intervention training, whether it be fair and impartial training, bias-free policing. We have the luxury here of training our officers to a very high standard, and we take every advantage of it.
Can I just capitalize on that CIT training, critical incident training? That is, that's a 40-hour course. Each one of our police officers, all 44 or 42 right now, have been through that. Our town is committed to that. I think most of the area towns as well. It teaches de-escalation. It teaches how to deal with mental health. It's a positive component of officers dealing with the public. And so we're very progressive. We're very fortunate that our towns back us on that.
Thank you. There's the last part of that question says, what are your stances on defunding the police to provide money for other community services?
I could just add to that. I would strongly disagree with it. I think that if you defund the police are not going to get the kind of training that they need to undergo. There's many different divisions in a police department, such as officers who specialize in the investigation of child sexual abuse, financial crimes, offices in the police department that are forensic experts that know how to analyze cell phones, digital evidence. If we defund the police and you're a victim of a crime involving those kind of cases, who is going to be qualified to investigate it? So I think it's a simplistic notion about defunding the police. But if you're a parent and you have a child who has been sexually abused and there's no one really qualified to investigate it, I think any person with common sense would have a problem with that. So I don't agree with it as a prosecutor.
Yeah, I think that the term has been thrown around quite a bit. I think it's kind of been misused, so to speak. I think what people are looking at is that there needs to be money dedicated for social service programs to help the police deal with issues that are not really law enforcement related, dealing with mental health issues, drug abuse, things like that. The police have been forced to deal with those issues, but in reality, there's other people that are better trained and better capable to deal with those issues, and money should be spent on those. And obviously, when you're dealing with resources, money is always an issue, especially at the state level. But I think it's not an all or nothing. I think both of those things, I think the police can be funded, and I think we can find money to properly fund social service programs that would better help the community and get the police out of law enforcement issues that are not law enforcement issues, that are social service issues.
Thank you. Kind of like the last part to this question as well. How often are cops encouraged to engage with their community?
Monica, I'll jump on that. It's Fodi Koskinas from Westport. I find it to be a more simpler answer than it really is. I think every individual shift that every officer goes on, they should be interacting with their community. We shouldn't be waiting for a crisis or a bad incident to say, now we should be interacting with our community. The only way we can navigate through those difficult times and have the support of the community, and at the same time, the community have the support of the police, is if you interact on a regular basis. Obviously, that will vary from urban to some of our smaller communities, as you see on this panel. But I think I speak for all of us. The interaction needs to be constant. It needs to be monitored. And not all interaction is good. It's up to the supervisors to make sure that their officers are doing the right things and that it's positive interaction. So it really trickles, but it does fall on us, the panel that you're sitting here, our beliefs, and those have to filter down to the youngest officer. And those expectations have to be met, or we're not accomplishing the goals that we're all saying we're here to accomplish.
Thank you.
Our next question is, do you believe that police officers need or benefit from equipment that has been coined the term militarized policing?
Well, I'll start with that. As far as I know, and I don't want to speak for all the chiefs on the group here, but I don't believe any of the chiefs here have what I would term militarized gear that they're using on a day-to-day basis in policing their communities. I think several of us have equipment from the military that is a valuable asset to us, such as a armored vehicle to use in a barricaded subject in a rescue situation, high water rescue vehicles and things like that. But I don't know many, if any, in Connecticut that have equipment that I would consider to be military gear that is used on a day-to-day basis to police their communities. I think, again, that's another term that's been thrown around, but the Connecticut police chiefs have put a hold on any military gear coming any agencies, or requested that voluntarily for 90 days to evaluate the whole process to make sure that departments are using that equipment properly. I think it's a case of using equipment in the appropriate manner and not misusing it.
Thank you. There are quite a bit of questions, so I'm going to try to get to everyone. Next question is, what are each police department doing to enforce policy that deals with bias and use of force? Are these policies in writing? Or however, like, how are they currently working if they're not being enforced?
I'll answer that question. We have policies on use of force and bias-based profiling. And a policy is one thing, but if you're not overseeing it and holding everyone accountable for it, meaning you're doing reports, you're analyzing the data, you're looking at who's using force and why, you're looking at who the officers are arresting and in comparison to your population. And if you see trends that you don't like, if you don't act on it, then you're not a good leader. So policies are great, but the chief of the department is responsible for enforcing the policies and making sure everyone's following them. So if you're not doing that analysis of your policies to make sure that you're in compliance with them, then they're not going to work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question. Is there training for police officers to help them recognize mental illness and then to proceed peacefully with concern?
I guess I'll jump on it again a little bit.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Tom. The last 5 years, officer wellness has been at the forefront of just about everything what we're doing, or we're trying to incorporate it in all of our training. And I think that goes for all departments and certainly statewide. And there's even financial funding from the federal government. We see a lot of suicide in law enforcement. We see a lot of prevention work that we're currently doing. That's very important. I will say we have certainly gotten better at acknowledging that people do struggle. There's debriefings in between major incidents and make sure people get the proper help. I would say that every one of our organization participates and is active in some type of employee assistance program, along with peer counseling and counseling from within the department and outside the department. There's certainly, I think all of us would be naive to not realize there is a stigma to trying to get help that has not been wiped away, as no matter how hard we try. And again, it's the culture that we live within the police department, and it's up to us as the managers to oversee that and have it trickle down that it is okay to get help. We are human beings. All of us are the same on this panel, just some of us wear uniforms. Our feelings are the same, how we handle things are the same, and we need to acknowledge that. That's where I think we get in a lot of trouble when we fail to do that. It's just a uniform we're wearing. Everything else about us is pretty much the same.
Thank you for that. Next question, what share of your department, so these is directed to the police chiefs, what share of your department police training covers de-escalation techniques and eliminating racial biases? I know we touched on it a little bit more, but if anyone cared to elaborate.
We do fair and impartial and bias-free policing every year and in-service training with prominent legal practitioners from across the state who do our training. We have sent officers to train the trainer for bias-free and fair and impartial policing. We take a very strong stance on ensuring that our officers are treating people of all walks of life fairly and impartially. And if folks think that they're not getting treated that way, we stand ready to investigate it. I think our officers are out there doing a fair and reasonable job every day here in Darien.
Okay.
Thank you. For the next question, it is, what protocols are put in place for unlawful searches as well as unlawful arrests?
I'll jump in and from the prosecutor side, when we see that, we are talking to chiefs, we're talking to supervisors of those officers, letting them know that, hey, here's a situation where the officer overstepped or didn't comply with their obligations. We are, I don't want to say prosecutors kind of keep a book on which officers kind of cross the line, but we we'll look at things or officers that have kind of shown us that they might be on the edge, look at those a little more critically in certain instances or circumstances. So that's from the prosecutor's perspective, what or how we're looking at that. I know the chiefs, when we call them and say, hey, here's an issue, at least when I was down in Stanford dealing with this group of chiefs, you know, they're very responsive and make sure the officers understand what they're doing and making sure they comply with the, you know, the training or requests that we have from the courts.
Yeah, I would agree, because we also lose evidence when that happens, so it's not taken lightly. So yeah, we follow up. We want to talk to that person. That person just may need retraining. That might be the issue. Or if it's more systematic, then the person needs to be possibly disciplined by the police department. But there's a real penalty for it, because if an arrest is made illegally or if a search is done illegally, we lose the evidence. And that's, you know, if that's all we have, you know, the case goes out the window and we have to explain that to victims. So it's something we take very seriously.
Thank you. Our next question. As a social worker, we receive supervision and other outlets to help us deal with stress and secondhand trauma. Do police receive any services to help them deal with stress and trauma when they encounter?
Yeah, I can talk this Chief Henyon in Weston. Pretty much speak for the other chiefs. Almost all of us have an employee assistance program, which is usually a professional group that we can go to that offers counseling, anonymous counseling for any issues an officer may have, whether it be outside the police department, in an issue in he or she's personal life, or if they encounter an incident on the job, a traumatic crime scene or accident, that they can call anonymously, not reporting it to the police chief or the command staff, so they could get help. Also in Weston, we've instituted relatively recently a peer support system, which I hear some of the other chiefs have, which is a peer-to-peer contact where one of the officers is sent to extra training to recognize issues. Maybe the officer's not acting right. Maybe there's something going on. He's just not, you know, what he used to be. So he can talk to a peer officer and get some information on whatever the issue is and talk it out. And if need be, they could bring it up to the command to try to deal with. We also have a chaplaincy program in the town of Weston. Our local religious leaders can sign up. Almost all of them have with the police department to be a police chaplain. And that involves both helping the citizens in town, should they have need in a congregation for counseling where an issue comes up that the police department is aware of, or even one of my own officers who's struggling. The chaplains are trained counselors, and they can certainly meet with any of them. They'll come in at any time of the day or night, talk to us, meet with the officers alone to deal with that. So it's an important aspect in policing, with the stresses that are on the officers, both, you know, personally and on the job, that they have that outlet that they can go to somebody before it becomes a big problem and then overflows into their job performance. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important. I don't mean to speak for the other chiefs, but I'm sure most, if not all, the chiefs have these programs in their department.
Thank you. The next question is, what do the police chiefs think about police reforms that are being proposed across the country relating to chokehold ban, public registry of complaints, et cetera?
As far as here in Darien, we banned chokeholds decades ago. Again, it's not an outright prohibition, that if you could use deadly force and you were fighting for your life, a chokehold may be the less use of force to use, right? We're on a very, very strict regimen here that you only use the least amount of force that you can use. And many times, most of the time, that should be no force. And that's the standard we hold our officers to. So I think we're ahead of the curve from that, as we are with positional asphyxia and that type of stuff. We've been training on that for 2 decades about not having people down on their stomach when they can't breathe. So some of these reforms nationally, some of them have a good basis as a broad base, but the devil is in the details, as they often say. I don't think you can have an out and out prohibition against the chokehold, except if you could use deadly force.
I'd like to just add also, just piggybacking on Chief Anderson's comments. The Police Officer Standards Training Council voted, I believe, about 2 weeks ago to mandate, even though most agencies did have these policies in place, they did vote to mandate that all police agencies in Connecticut adjust their policies on chokeholds, duty to intervene, reporting malfeasance, et cetera. So if agencies were not doing it, and I think most were, it's been mandated by the state now that they must. So I think those issues, for the most part, have.
You've muted yourself. Okay. For the next question, we have, what kind of additional training do you anticipate giving to police officers, detectives, and supporting staff regarding addressing biases and within different departments?
Well, I think I can speak for everybody. We're always looking for additional training. It comes down to resources. It comes down to money at times, but all of us, no one's going to refuse additional training. That's something we're always looking for. The state has been challenged in recent years because of the budgets in providing free training in addition to what's mandated. But local departments have stepped up and have been footing the bill, so to speak, and have been looking to do as much as they can afford to do to train their officers on all those issues. And anything that comes up that's new that we can implement, that we can afford to bring to our departments, we're doing it. And I think that's true for all of us here.
Thank you. Getting quite a few questions about the body cameras and if they're being turned off. What disciplinary actions do you guys take if they are turned off or not properly in use while during an interaction?
I'll answer that question. Much like I think every department that's on this call, we have a very clear policy on when body cameras must be activated. Mm-hmm. And the few instances where they're not to be activated, for example, during a medical call where someone's privacy is a concern, versus virtually every other instance, the officer should have body camera on, and they can be disciplined for a violation of that policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. For the next question, directed towards officers, what is the average annual overtime pay per employee, and what percentage of this is the base salary? You can answer that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get the beginning of it.
Sure. What is the average annual overtime pay per employee, and what is the percentage of this of their base salary?
Wow, it really varies officer to officer. Some officers work a lot of overtime, some work none. So there's really no set percentage, so to speak. It really depends. I have many officers who work an extreme amount of overtime and extra duty. I have others that don't do any. So I think that's probably true for most of the chiefs here, that it really varies across the department.
Thank you. Our next question. How does your police department handle minor or serious citizen complaints towards police personnel? Can the police themselves without an independent body, such as Civilian Review Board?
Sure, I'll answer that one. Any hint of a complaint, we investigate. Even if it's anonymous, we investigate. We always we want people to feel free to complain. They can complain anonymously, they can complain online, they can complain at town hall. There's forms there as well. Our link, the complaint link is on our website, the town hall website, easily accessible. We're looking for feedback. And I will say, many times it's a misunderstanding or the officer could have done it better. It's a learning process. If you're talking about minor issues, sometimes it's an attitude. We'll play that video for the officer and point out and let them self-evaluate under our supervision. And many times they realize how they're coming across and they improve. And I will say almost every time there's a complaint, whether the officer is exonerated, we always find a way or something that we could do better. So it is a learning process. We try to make it easy and we're as accessible as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, how has COVID-19 affected law enforcement's efforts, and how much do you spend enforcing COVID-related regulations?
Well, I'll start that. I think the response to COVID-19 has negatively impacted police as far as our community policing efforts. We had made a major effort to be a part of the community, be out there meeting with people, holding meetings, et cetera. And because of the restrictions with COVID-19, that all ended. As you see here, we're on a Zoom meeting, and it's very difficult to make those bonds with people when you're doing it by video. So it set us back. We're doing the best we can, but it did have a major impact, at least in Norwalk, in our ability to really be out there and interact with the community.
Would anybody else care to answer?
And I just jump in real quick too. I'm also the emergency management director for Wilton, and I'm also the representative for our region, which is 14 municipalities, including Norwalk, Stamford, and some Bridgeport. So the COVID crisis, it affected all of us, and I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
It's okay. Just gonna hop into the next question. So for the panelists, what are your thoughts, ideas, and programs you would implement in the community, in your communities, to mend or solidify relationships within our minority population?
Monica, if I can start off on that one, it's Fody Koskinas from Westport for those listening. I think one area that I have certainly learned in dealing with Brenda and working with Reverend Ingram and Greg and everything, I think we all do a very good job on focusing on our community, so to speak, meaning I work well with my Westport community. But what I'm finding is a lot of your community and Tom's community is coming into Westport, whether to work, visit, entertain, and are interacting with our police. I think, and through many different ways, our officers have to have a certain level of interaction of what's going on in area communities. Going back to what Chief Kaholic said earlier, we have over 100 police departments in the state. That's highly unusual how we're broken up when you look at, certainly around the world, but certainly even within the country. So even though our neighboring communities make up of our day-to-day population, we really don't interact in many ways the way we should. So that's one area when Brenda and I got together, and that relationship's only gotten better the years, is actually getting to know your community better that is coming into our community and interacting with them and understanding the culture differences, what they expect of us, what we expect of them, and to not create a color barrier or because of the car they're driving or the way they look or the way they dress. I think that's an area that we need to do better. We need to understand better. And that would ultimately make these relationships, we can't be working on physical borders of 136 entering Norwalk, and that's a different jurisdiction. It may seem like a different jurisdiction, but they're all the same people that we're all interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The next question is for Norwalk Chief and Attorney Colangelo. The NAACP did a study and presented it to the chief. The study showed that a majority of police stops in Norwalk were of Black people, when Black people only make up 14% of the population. What has been done to lower this percentage?
I'll start that. I'm not familiar with a NAACP study. I might be incorrect, but I am aware of the state racial profiling study that was done. Well, it's done every year. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, we were identified as showing disparities. And we work with Central Connecticut State University and the Institute of Municipal Policing, IMRP, whatever that's called, with their group, providing them with additional details. And once all said and done, they determined that, in fact, the disparities, I wouldn't say justified, but there was an explanation for them by where the stops were made, the population, the driving population versus your regular population is very different. So when it was all said and done, they determined that they didn't feel our disparities were of concern. And for the last 2 years, we have not been identified as having any issues. But I'll defer to Brenda if there's another study or something that I'm not familiar with. I don't recall another NAACP study.
Yeah, Kim, I really don't either.
A study may have been before I became president, so I'm not sure of it, but I will find out.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, how are police departments interacting and communicating information with each other in order to have better policing?
I'll start that. I will say I've been the chief for 8 years now, and it's better than ever. Our Fairfield County chiefs, we are in contact. I won't say daily, but almost daily. The emails are flying all the time, especially over the last, month or two. As issues are developed, we're in constant contact with each other. We work together great. We all get along. And statewide, Chief Mello, the outgoing president for the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, did a great job of bringing the state chiefs together. I think that in general, in the state and in Fairfield County in particular, things have improved dramatically, bringing people together, understanding issues across the state and working together to try to make things better statewide.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in, I had a senior moment before, but the whole COVID thing was, we all entered into that. And part of this is all the chiefs in the area in a positive effort, bringing people together, trying to work with people. It wasn't about enforcement. It was all about positive and working with the communities.
Thank you.
You got it, Monica.
Yes, thanks. So our next question. To the Chief of Police in Norwalk, to Norwalk PD Commission, has the mayor and the mayor as commissioner, would this be a conflict of interest in overseeing the police department?
I can't really say. I don't think it is. But as I said, our police commission is a little different in Norwalk in that they oversee hiring of officers. They oversee the overall workings of the department. I report to the police commission. But as far as disciplinary issues, I advise them, but they have no say over that. So I don't know that there's really a conflict there. I will say that I get along great with the mayor. He was my boss for, 25 or 28 years before he was the mayor. Mm-hmm. So, we do get along. I do speak with him regularly. He's well aware of what we're doing, and I keep him abreast of what's going on, but I don't see that as a conflict per se. And I make sure that it's not. We've had a couple issues where there's been issues regarding people that are known to the mayor, and Rich knows, we've reached out and, farmed those issues out to independent investigators to make sure that there was no conflict there. We're very cognizant of that. So I don't see that, although I can see where people would have that perception.
Thank you. I do want to ask for all the police chiefs, what are some areas of improvement in your department, and what is one commitment you can make to bring about an immediate and meaningful change?
Well, I'll start. I think it's important when we experienced our protest. I think the first key is listening and being approachable. Our Lady of Fatima Church has offered to those that had questions to start that conversation, and we're available. We're available here. Our doors are open. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want to make a difference with you. We want to build your trust. So the fact that there's questions regarding trusting us, that's a problem. And we're open to trying to fix that, which is why we're here tonight.
Yeah, as far as Norwalk is concerned, I think one area we identified, and I know Brenda and I were at a meeting last week talking about this, is that it seems that there's a disconnect maybe with the young people. We've done a great job of building relationships throughout the community, but although we've tried to build relationships with the young people, it seems that there are many that still either don't trust us, have not reached out, or we can't reach them. And we're looking at ways to try to bring them into the fold and get them into a forum to be able to hear their concerns and be able to respond to them in particular, because the young people obviously are the future. And what we've done with the people that are my age, so to speak, is great, but it's that new generation coming up that we really have to impact. So that's an area where we're going to focus on. And once these restrictions are lifted a bit and we can start, scheduling meetings and things, we're going to be working on that, at least in Norwalk.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to talk about this?
Well, a group like this, being part of this task force, certainly is a start for me. I've only been the chief here for 9 months, and I welcome the interaction from folks, not just from our town, but from across the region. I am a member of the Human Services Planning Commission here in Fairfield County, based in Darien, but we have clergy, we have Liberation House, YW, YM. It's made up of a cross section of a lot of social service agencies. And the fact that they know me by my first name, they know my phone number. It's not, they have to call the chief of police. They're calling Don when they call to have the conversation. So far for me. And I think if you polled folks like that, they would say we have made inroads trying to have a broad base here across the board where we can be most effective as a public service organization.
Okay, we have time for one more question. And if we didn't get to your questions, we're gonna have the chiefs answer the question, and we will post it on the NAACP website. So we have time for one more question, and then we're gonna have closing statements from each chief. Okay, thank you.
Okay, for the last question, I'd like to shift the conversation to community for peace and unity and how we can go about it. The information is great, but I believe we need to think about how we can work together to improve the system and the community. So the question is, how can we go about shaping a community for peace and unity?
And I'll jump in. I'll start. I mean, just what we're doing here today, giving people a voice, giving them access to ask the questions, explaining the answers, showing that, each of these chiefs, state attorney's office, they're accessible. You should get the answers you want. You should bring them your concerns, and just making people or having people understand that is a huge start.
Anyone else would like to answer?
Yeah, I think it's just continuing the dialogue and the communication. Really, that's what it amounts to. I think this has been great. Like I said, I've been the chief for 8 years, and I've been the deputy before that. So I've never seen anything like this, bringing all the chiefs, NAACP, the state's attorney's office, everybody together, because we're all in the same boat, so to speak. We're all dealing with the same issues, and to have everyone together talking about these things is tremendous. So I think this is a great start.
Okay, thank you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have each one of you give a ending statement, And then I will give my statement, and I would like to thank the moderators. They were awesome. And you talk about young people, we went and we found these young people and they were awesome. Thumbs up, clap, clap. You guys did it. Thank you. Okay, so who would like to be the first one to say their final statement?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So first of all the credit goes to Brenda for bringing this all together and leading everybody in the right
Thank
direction.
you.
So thank you. And I think we need to look at this from a different perspective in some ways. Connecticut, Fairfield County is different than the rest of the nation in a lot of ways. And I think you've seen how professional all the police chiefs are and how well run all these departments are. And I think it's hard for us when we see horrible criminal things happen at the hands of police officers in other parts of our nation. And sometimes folks like to look at all police as doing these kinds of acts. And what I'd say is there's nearly 1 million police officers in the United States. They handle millions and millions of incidents. Hundreds of thousands of them are violent and horrible. And most of the time, the vast majority of the time, they're handled perfectly. And there's a few instances of really bad decisions and criminal behavior by officers, but don't let that color your view of police officers, especially here in Fairfield County, because each and every day they go out there, they do their best, they put their lives at risk, and they try to do the best they can. Certainly they're human and sometimes they make mistakes, but in other parts of the country, you don't have the caliber of officers you have in Fairfield County. So you should all be proud of that, but we're certainly all looking to improve. And when we stop looking to improve, then we stop growing. And I think we're all today because we want to improve and grow and do better. And so thanks to all the chiefs too for being on this call.
Brenda, I'll jump in. It's Fody Koskinas from Westport. Obviously, echo everything that Leon said. I know there were a lot of questions and I was reading them. I wish I had the opportunity to answer. An area that we've had incredible success, and I think we need to do more of, is when we do have a complaint come in, especially when it appears, or it may have been racially motivated or certainly appeared that way. We've asked that person to come and speak to our classes of officers and let them know. I think there's a huge disconnect of what an officer perceives when they're encountering somebody and what that person feels about the officer. So we can certainly do better in that area through our training and understanding how each side feels. At the same time, I don't think we were loud enough in saying, as far as the chief, that I do really speak for all of us here. We're probably the harshest critics of the bad apples, including the two prosecutors that are with us. There's nothing more upsetting and disappointing than to have an officer that completely loses the trust of the community. But it is just as bad, the loss of trust that's done within the organization and other officers in the area. And I don't think we highlighted that enough. I can speak, I'm learning and I'm seeing who Paul is, and certainly haven't worked with him as much as my 25 years with Rich. But when we did have to arrest one of our officers who went to jail, spent significant time in jail, I can't tell you the support that we got from the prosecutor's office and how it was handled. There was never a look at, we're going to treat this person different because they're a police officer. If anything, there was a look of, we're going to hold him to a much higher standard because he disappointed our community, he disappointed the prosecutor's office, and he really failed and lost trust that all the other officers commit to day in and day out. So there's so much more to talk. I think this is an early start. I don't think we spent enough time talking about the peace and unity, but we certainly can't get there without answering the questions that our community has and the answers that they're looking for. So again, thank you for putting the panel together. I would say we might have scratched the surface with this meeting. There's a lot of work, and I hope we don't just push this aside and not see each other for months. I think there's a lot of work to be done. Again, Cameron, Monica, thank you. This is exactly what Tom said. It's your generations that we're lacking the relationships with. So for you to even have what it takes to come and stand in front of us, hold your ground, answer, ask the tough questions and put them out there, I can't thank you enough. And our doors are really open for people in your generation or others that want to meet with us individually. So again, thank you for everybody's time. I take it very seriously. And I know I speak for all of us on this panel. We wouldn't be here. I don't think anybody's here because they felt they had to be. Thank you.
Brenda, I'll jump in just to add to that. I've only been state's attorney for 2 months, and I've been getting out. I've been meeting a lot of the chief of police. I met John today. I met Ed. Tomorrow I'm meeting Darien as well, and then I'll have 4 more police departments to visit. And I'm making a real effort to go out there rather than having them come to the courthouse, because I think it's important as state's attorney to get to know the departments, know their physical plan, meet the people that are there, especially in the Norwalk area, because they don't generally come to Stamford. They usually go to the Norwalk courthouse. But I think we should all be really proud of what we did tonight, because we all are part of the community. And this was a really learning experience for me. A lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight, I had spoken to many of the same topics with the chiefs of police, such as what efforts are you making at training and stress and diversity training and cultural competency. And a lot of that was repeated tonight. So this was, I'm new at this, I'm getting out there, I'm meeting people, and this was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, and thanks to everybody who participated, especially the monitors. And I also will say this, I think the questions were non-confrontational. They were very intelligent questions. And I think it shows that we're really all on the same page. We all want to fix the situation. So thanks again.
I'd like to thank not only the moderators, but the technical support people that we don't see on the screen for allowing this to happen. And I'm very appreciative and heartened to be part of this group. I do want to also thank, I have a good cross-section of my staff on their own time watching this interchange tonight, not because they have to, but they recognize the importance of what we're up against here. And they're all proud to be police officers. They want to do it professionally. So not only do we have sworn staff, we have other folks here in Darien, police commissioners, elected officials watching this as well. I think we're all on the same page that they realize how important public safety service is, not just to our residents, but to visitors who come to Darien, and that we want to do it right. We want to do it lawfully. We want to do it reasonably and with participation of everyone who has a say for us. So I am very thankful to be here. I will be more than happy to do it again. You let me know what time, what channel, and I will be back.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and I want to thank everybody. I know we're short on time, so I agree with what all the other chiefs said. I had written down a couple things: high standards and resources. We're very fortunate in this area to have that. The fact that we're here today means we still have a lot of work to do, and we're committed to continuing this. And I just did want to point out, because Chief Kahalwick had mentioned it earlier about our youth, and I agree with him firmly. And I think it's so important to have the SROs involved. They're a non-criminal component. They're there to work with the youth and build gain their trust, and be that medium with the school administration. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And again, thank you for inviting us and starting this, and let's keep it going.
Hi, Ed Hennigan in Weston. I don't want to repeat what the other chief said. I want to echo what they said. What I'm hearing, by watching protests around the country and here in Connecticut is, if there's a perception by the public that their concerns are not being heard, they need to be brought forward. And this forum is a great step in that direction. And I encourage more of these to happen. I encourage the public to come in and meet with any of the chiefs who are on this panel if they have a concern about their individual towns. We are public entities. We're accountable to the public. The public can come into any of our, in Weston, our Board of Police Commissioner meetings, our Board of Selectmen meetings, any of the meetings in town, the Board of Education, if you have a concern there. We are accountable to the public. And sometimes there's a perception out there that maybe doesn't reach it to the chiefs or the entities in the town, because we're accountable to the public. So I appreciate everybody, especially the moderators. It's really great to see you put this together, and thank you.
Yeah, I just, again, I don't want to reiterate what everyone said, and I agree with all the chiefs, and I'm proud to be with all of you. I think this is a good start. I think we have a ways to go. But again, for Monica and Cameron, thank you. I appreciate it. And don't hesitate to reach out. Brenda said you're both from Norwalk, so if you'd like to stop in and see me or, get a tour or whatever, just wear a mask, but you're welcome to come in. Love to speak with you further. What I will say that hasn't been mentioned, and it's something that it's kind of a negative, but What I will say is years past, I think many chiefs, not the ones in this room, but years past, were very adverse to change and listening. And I think those days are over. I think you're seeing that the chiefs now really want to be open to their communities. They really want to hear from them. They're willing to listen. They're willing to change. If you have a good idea, bring it forth, whatever city or town it is, we're willing to listen. We want to make things better. It also makes our job easier, and it makes our officers' job easier. So it benefits both of us. And I also want to put a shout out to Larry. I know he's still listening in. He's had some very late nights because he's doing all these Norwalk Zoom meetings and council meetings and everything. I know he's working all kinds of weird hours. So thank you, Larry, for that. And Brenda, thank you again for organizing this.
I think I might be the last one, but I'll just jump in and thank Cameron and Monica, and let you know that, it is important not only that we listen, that your voices are heard, and that you are really, your generation is going to drive the change that's needed in the criminal justice system to move us forward, to build those relationships and bridge that distrust. And I just want to say that I'm happy to be here. I wasn't invited. Brenda told me I had to be here though, unfortunately. So, unlike everybody else, I'm kidding, Brenda, but thank you so much, guys, seriously. And I am here. If you need anything or need any contacts, please reach out.
Okay. Thank you, chiefs and state attorneys. Thank you very much. Monica, Cam, do you have anything to say? Final thoughts?
Yes, I have a brief closing statement. Thank you to all the police chiefs and state attorneys for taking their time to answer some of the community's questions. I would also like to thank the NAACP for all the people who were able to attend this event. The importance of fostering a strong and honest relationship between these two communities is crucial to the continued improvement of the city of Norwalk and all the other cities. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you. I also want to say thank you to the NAACP, the Chief of Police, Connecticut State Attorney, the Attorney for the District of Connecticut, and the people who logged in and participated in this forum. I thank you again for joining us. At the end of the day, we want policy change. We can meet, but what are we meeting for? We're not marching just to march. We are marching towards something bigger. And we all want, I think, in agreement that we want systematic, transformative change, both locally and on a national level. As I said before, this is just the beginning. So let's continue to move forward and put our actions behind our words. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to thank the panelists, the moderators, and the participants. I hope that everyone gathered today really got something out of this town hall and will learn more and will leave more informed. Again, thank you. Reverend Ingram?
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
have anything to say?
Well, Brenda, thank you so much. I look forward to our future meetings. Unashamedly and unapologetically, I have a different perspective from our local NAACP, our national NAACP. And I think it is of tremendous importance that we be willing to listen to other voices. There's a large constituency that does not believe the sky is falling, and we cannot afford to just dismiss them. So I look forward to continuing to work with the NAACP, and please make certain that there's room for all of us at the table. And to that end, I'm pleased to pronounce a benediction as we bring this evening's town hall meeting to a close. Gracious Father, we thank you for a gathering. We thank you, God, for the input of those who have served on the panel, their commitment, oh God, to just working towards greater harmony within our communities. But then to God, we ask that for us in the minority community, may we rise to the challenge, oh God, of just doing the right thing. And even as we engage with our local police departments, we pray that the outcomes would be positive. And oh God, that we realize that we're really working towards the same end. We ask that there will be peace on this earth, and may it begin with us. We ask these blessings in your name. Amen.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Brenda, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Thank you once again May you go all in peace and stay safe. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.